What up, though? InfoWars. University Black History Month speaker goes on unhinged racist rant. Whites are psychopaths by Patrick McDonald, Campus Reform. This is 2024. In his UCSF lecture, Dante King stated that whites are psychopaths, claiming that American law allows the violation of black women, and accused Florida Governor Ron DeSantis of promoting racism. The University of California, San Francisco recently invited a speaker to deliver a lecture during Black History Month that featured several racially charged statements. On February 8th, author and critical theorist Dante King delivered a talk at UCSF titled Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness, White Psychopathology, Collective Psychosis, and Trauma in America. I think I got trauma just reading that. White Psychopathology, Collective Psychosis, and Trauma in America. Hold on, I'm going to call the ambulance. Which focused on the development, construction, and functionality of race and racism as psychopathology, psychopathy, and sociopathy. Invited Dante King to speak at Diagnosing Whiteness. He claims that whites are psychopaths and that white people have it written in the law you can violate black women. He also makes excuses for black teenagers who commit crimes. This is the modern university. Several of King's comments, including his statement, whites are psychopaths and their behavior represents an underlying biologically transmittable proclivity with roots deep in their evolutionary history. King continued, asking the audience to demonstrate by show of hands how many of you could see the proclivity that evolved deep within the evolutionary history of whiteness. King went on to claim that those who didn't raise their hands were in denial. He later added, I think whites are psychopathic. I think there are many lies. The level of lying that white people do that has started since colonialism, we're just used to it. King also said that violation culture in America is a legal, economic, and moral institution, and claimed that we have it written in the law you can violate black women. King continued by attacking Florida governor and his work against critical race theory, alleging that the governor is using Florida taxpayer dollars to promote hating black people. The lecturer seemed to justify certain acts of violence, saying teenagers, young people that are going out and committing home invasion and hitting people, women over the head with objects and stealing their purses. I want to just say, that's just human nature, and continued later. If you're sitting here, you're going, wow, he sounds pretty pro-black. I am. And for all you white people who are unwilling to admit that you're pro-white, you're just not saying it. The moderator asking how King would answer potential accusations that he is guilty of reverse racism, to which King responded, I don't make room for that. King is the executive director of Blackademics, a nonprofit focused on educating students and families across race about the legacy and persistence of white supremacy and anti-blackness in America, as well as worldwide. King is the executive director of Black Academics. I wouldn't sign up for Black Academics. I don't know, it just don't seem interesting. King has previously taught classes for Stanford Medical School, Johns Hopkins, UCSF, and the Mayo Clinic, as seen on his website. Standards are getting pretty low. King is also the author of The 400-Year Holocaust, White America's Legal, Psychopathic, and Sociopathic Black Genocide, and The Revolt Against Critical Race Theory, which examines and discusses the relationships between the legal history of anti-blackness and whiteness through colonialism and the United States, and its impacts on present-day America, and posits that racism is a disease, illness, i.e. psychosis, psychopathy, sociopathy, etc., as featured on his website. King is scheduled to speak again at UCSF in early March at a webinar titled Understanding the Roots of Racism and Bias, Anti-Blackness, and Its Links to Whiteness, White Racism, Privilege, and Power, which is a multi-day intensive group workshop focused on disrupting racism and racial bias, increasing awareness of perpetual systematic racial inequities through the lens of race, sex, and gender. UCSF's plan to award over $100,000 for anti-race biomedical research projects. I need a nap after that, man, for real. Here he is. It's a woman with tape over her mouth, second-class citizen. I believe this is Angela Davis with the fresh natural. Revolution is a serious thing. The most serious thing about a revolutionary's life. When one commits oneself to the struggle, it must be for a lifetime. Stop struggling. I don't think Angela Davis is still struggling. She's a professor. Pretty sure she lives a pretty cushy life. I think this is Big Mike, the rapper. The psychology of black oppression. Ooh. Stop the genocide of black people. I think the genocide worked. I've never seen a black human, so there are none. Mission accomplished. Systemic race. Wait. He has a white lab coat on with a surgical mask, and he also has his scrubs. I thought you were supposed to wear those things in the hospital for a reason. And if you wear them outside of the hospital, wouldn't that defeat the purpose? Is this all speaking to a sterile, germ-free environment? So we have I assume, a doctor here. He has a white lab coat on, unless he has a Halloween costume on. It says, this doctor, he has a piece of cardboard. He could have afforded a better sign, better paper, poster board. Systemic racism is a public health crisis. Hashtag white coats. Yeah, I don't really put too much thought in. substance and white coats. Prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, threatens the future, and renders the present inaccessible. Maya Angelou. This is from The Hill. Black Caucus unveils next steps to combat racism by Mike Lillis. In the picture, it says the leaders. Okay, here we go. Leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus on Wednesday announced the next phase in their strategy for fighting institutional racism, the same institutional racism that allowed the Congressional Black Caucus to ascend to the prestigious positions that they hold. The group has led the charge for Democrats in the wake of Floyd's death on May 25th, drafting expansive police reform legislation that was whisked quickly to the House floor last week, where it passed easily, no doubt. The next round of CBC reform is broader still, touching on issues that run a spectrum from healthcare and education to voting rights and reparations for slavery. They touching on all the points, all the talking points. The CBC is hoping they'll get a boost from the national protest movement. Yeah. Let's get those people out there raising them fists, spray paint, screaming. The movement for justice has now expanded to include a call to end systemic racism in the United States. Rep. Karen Bass, Democrat of California, chairwoman of the CBC, told reporters in the Capitol. The difference is this time CBC members will support by a national movement. At the root of the effort is legislation sponsored by Rep. Sheila Jackson Lee, Democrat for Texas, to create a 13-member commission charged with studying the legacy of slavery, then recommending policy prescriptions designed to iron out the racial disparities that have persisted across institutions even 155 years later. Jackson Lee characterized the bill as the answer to the original sin. Michelle Obama speaks out about racism she faced as First Lady on her podcast. Michelle Obama speaks out about facing racism as First Lady. Michelle Obama spoke candidly about experiencing racism as a black woman in America, both in and out of the White House, on the latest episode of the Michelle Obama podcast. Obama said, this is what the white community doesn't understand about being a person of color in this nation, is that there are daily slights in our workplaces where people talk over you or people don't even see you. This is from www.l.com. Michelle Obama says there are daily slights where people talk over you or people don't even see you. I happen to participate in the workplace, and she's lying. Period. Obama said that even from her 8 years as First Lady of the United States, she had a number of stories of white people treating her as invisible. When I've been completely incognito during the 8 years in the White House, walking the dogs on the canal, people will come up and pet my dogs, but will not look at me in my eye. They don't know it's me. She recalled, later adding, "That is so telling of how white America views people who are not like them, like we don't exist. And when we do exist, we exist as a threat, and that's exhausting." She said, "When I've been completely incognito during the 8 years in the White House walking the dogs on the canal, people will come up and pet my dogs. That's usually what people do. How kind of them. I'm pretty sure you had Secret Service with you, so they didn't want to really get into asking you questions or, going too far. They didn't know it's me. Maybe. That is so, well, again, the entourage, I'm pretty sure, gave them a clue. That is so telling of how white America views people who are not like them. By white America, who do you mean? I've never, ever seen a human being that was white. And individuals are as different from relatives and family members as they are from strangers. She says, like we don't exist. She needs attention. She's already on television. She's already on podcasts and news channels and paparazzi. Always there. She needs more attention. And when we do exist, we exist as a threat. Now, I don't think anyone sees you as a threat, at least not physically, maybe policy-wise. And that's exhausting. One such incident involved not only Obama and Pemberton Heard, but Malia, 22, and Sasha, 19. Obama recounted a time that the four women got ice cream at a Haagen-Dazs during Barack Obama's presidency. We had just finished taking the girls to a soccer game with, does she get a detail, police detail, Secret Service detail as the first lady? We were stopping to get ice cream, and I had told the Secret Service, here we go. I had told the Secret Service to stand back. How far back? I mean, I'm pretty sure stand back doesn't mean like go take a walk around the corner and smoke a square. Because we were trying to be normal. Normal? You are normal. Well, trying to go in, Obama remembered. There was a line, and when I'm just a black woman, I noticed that white people don't even see me. They're not even looking at me. Newsflash. When you're just a black woman, I don't see you. I'm not even looking at you because I'm minding my business. And who the fuck are you? Yahoo Life. Michelle Obama on podcast speaks out about experiencing racism. White people don't even see me. Megan Sims. Here we go. The former First Lady says that she and her friends have always been able to have discussions about race, and the group decided to share their own experiences with racism, particularly when it comes to feeling like they are invisible to white people. They want to be seen by y'all so-called white people. Y'all don't see them? They always need attention. When I'm just a black woman, I notice that white people don't even see me. They're not even looking at me. Let's all start looking at her. The women also commented on the fact that they all have white friends, but observed that their white friends only had a few black friends. Now, if those white friends were to say something like they all have black friends, people would be looking at them crazy. This is from NPR. Obama on racial issues during his presidency through lens of his new memoir. This is Obama, the husband now, former president. NPR's Michael Martin talks with former President Barack Obama about his new memoir, A Promised Land. They're gonna stay with this narrative, this civil rights, slave, black, racism, white, this narrative. Remember the picture of Angela Davis when she had the quote where it said that, the struggle is for life. The struggle, i.e., the business of the struggle. Let's shake it. Barack Obama, I think that what did happen during my presidency was, yes, a backlash amongst some people who felt that somehow I symbolized the possibility that they or their group were losing status, not because of anything I did, but just by virtue of the fact that I didn't look like all the other presidents previously. It's amazing that someone holding such a, quote, high office, end quote, would still sell you victimhood. When does it stop? Why won't he just tell you the course that he took to get where he is? I think that would be more helpful, more beneficial. We don't like talking about the fact that if you grew up in a certain zip code, which he didn't, you're much less likely to be able to get a good education. You should get that at home. Your parents should educate you. You're much less likely to be able to be a part of the networks that allow you ultimately to get a good job. That's false. You're much less likely to get good social services in those areas. And that's the responsibility. That's not the police's fault. That's society's fault. No, society is a theoretical thing. What is society's last name? How does this society look? Show me a picture of society. I think the reason that I don't plunge into despair probably has to do with the fact that I tend to take a long view of things. And generally speaking, our kids' generation, you talk to them and their attitudes instinctively are more open, not just on racial issues, but on gender issues, on different orientation issues. And that is why I tend not to despair. Instead of plunging into despair, instead of this wealthy ex-president plunging into despair, he doesn't. Because this generation is more open on racial issues, on gender issues, and on various orientation issues. That's why he doesn't despair. Obama, I thought it was a good place to end the first volume because it describes a choice that I think we have as a country. And that is, can we take the incredible dedication, cooperation, patriotism, focus that we applied in the Bin Laden raid? Can we take that and apply that to reducing poverty among children? Can we take that focus and sense of common effort around dealing with climate change? Oh, man. These people are disgusting, man. Despicable, man. They are agents of confusion. They are agents of confusion. Smithing Society. History of Blacksmithing in America. Alex Steele, a fitting name. Blacksmithing has a long and rich history in America, spanning a wide range of centuries from the 16th to the 19th century. These highly skilled artisans meticulously forged pieces of iron, carefully manipulating its carbon content to produce strong and durable tools, weapons, and household items. The coal forge, operating at a white heat, provided the necessary temperature to work with a wide range of metals, including cast iron and mild steel. And now we'll go to ancestry.com. This is my second great uncle, the brother of my second great grandfather, the 1880 census. He is 37. His name is G. Tom. He was born in 1842, 1843 in Kentucky, Rockville, Warren County, Kentucky. They have him listed as mulatto, as do they have everyone else in his household and the dwelling that's right next to it, which is also my family. It's actually my second great grandfather's household. They have him listed as mulatto. He is married to Sarah, which is my grandmother's name, my current grandmother's name. His father and mother were both born in Kentucky, and his occupation, he's a blacksmith. G. Tom, second great uncle, blacksmith on the 1880 census. This is from the New Haven Register. Blacks in the 1700s elected own governor, and some hailed from Derby, Seymour. Oh, and the last one was from Ancestry.com. This is the New Haven Register. Blacks in 1700s elected own governors, and some hailed from Derby, Seymour. I won't spend a lot of time going over these terms that have utterly confused a large number of us. Blacks, African Americans, mulattoes, coloreds, Negroes. Okay. These things make us lazy. These things make us not really get to know people. I just showed you my second great grandfather's brother, and he was from Kentucky, and I showed you that for a reason. Because you can be lazy and call me black or this or that. But if you actually want to get to know someone, you have to find out who their family is and where they're from, where they were born. Let's shake it. From the mid 1700s to the mid 1800s, African Americans throughout Connecticut elected black governors, and a handful hailed from the Valley. The Valley black governors lived in Derby and in what is modern-day Seymour. Others were elected in Hartford, New Haven, Norwich, and several other towns. Often, blacks would create their own form of government and elect their leaders or governors, like they had been doing for centuries, maybe even millennia. Maybe in antiquity. Black governors led the African American communities and dealt with the issues that directly affected blacks. The black governors took care of the black people's issues, O'Keefe said, and in so doing, they were accepted by the whites in the community. O'Keefe said Juba Weston was elected black governor of Humphreysville in 1825. Juba Weston was elected black governor of Humphreysville in 1825. O'Keefe said birth records show Weston came from New York, and she believes he was a free man who was employed by the Humphreys family. We can't prove he was a slave, she said. O'Keefe said Juba Weston's son, Nelson, and Wilson Weston were elected black governors in 1850 and 1855, respectively. O'Keefe said African Americans in Derby also elected a governor named Tobias in 1815. His son, Eben Tobias Bassett, was elected governor in 1840. Traditionally, when the black governors took office, they were honored with the celebration that featured a military-style parade. In Seymour, the swearing-in festivities were held at the Mosher Tavern, O'Keefe said. The tavern, later known as Dutch Door Inn, was at the corner of Broad and Main Street, she said. O'Keefe said Derby resident Ebenezer D. Bassett, who was appointed in 1869 by President Ulysses S. Grant as ambassador to Haiti, also has a connection to the black governors. Bassett was the son of black governor Eben Tobias Bassett and grandson of black governor Tobias. O'Keefe said Tobias only used one name. Bassett was born in Litchfield in 1833 but moved to Derby as an infant. He served as the nation's first African American ambassador, or as he was described in a photo from that time, the colored minister to Haiti. As an aside, O'Keefe said Bassett and Derby native General David Humphreys, who served as a foreign minister to Portugal and later to Spain, both brought fame to Derby. This is a picture that I'm sure if you are here, most of you have probably seen this online somewhere. It's a picture. It says the first black members of Congress, and this is from 1870 and 1871, respectively. You can look at those names specifically and look those individuals up, do their genealogy, see where they're from, see what they call themselves, see what their families called themselves. Congressional Research Service, informing the legislative debate since 1914. African American members of the U.S. Congress, 1870 through 2020. Congressional Research Service. In total, 163 African Americans have served in Congress. This total includes 153 African Americans, 147 representatives, and 6 delegates elected only to the House of Representatives, 9 African Americans elected or appointed only to the Senate, and 1 African American who served in both chambers. The first African American members, Senator Hiram Rebels of Mississippi and Representative Joseph Rainey of South Carolina, both took the oath of office in 1870. These first 2 members were among the 22 African American members who began their service in the period of time after the Civil War, but prior to the start of the 20th century. Smithsonian Magazine. Again, the burden is yours to take what we go through in these sources and dig deeper. The people we're speaking of, these people may very well be a part of your family. You just never know until you look. I am by no means giving some kind of glory to these sources because, as we know, the Smithsonian, I'm pretty sure in the Smithsonian downstairs, they got your relatives' bones and everything else, clothes, jewelry. Let's shake it. America's first black physician sought to heal a nation's persistent illness, Brian Greene. James McCune Smith, he was the first African American to earn a medical degree, educated at the University of Glasgow in the 1830s. John Stauffer, a Harvard English professor who edited the works of James McCune Smith, says that Smith is one of the underappreciated literary lights of the 19th century, calling him one of the best read people that I've ever encountered. AAMC News. 10 African American Medical Pioneers by Julia Haskins. The Flying Black Medics, created by Leonidas Harris Berry, MD, returned from providing medical care and education to Cairo, Illinois residents in 1970. The Flying Black Medics, returning after hard work in Cairo Clinic, Ward Chapel, AME Church. The Flying Black Medics. In 1864, after years as a nurse, Rebecca Lee Crumpler became the first black woman in the United States to receive an MD degree. She earned that distinction at the New England Female Medical College in Boston, Mass. James McCune Smith, who we just spoke of, James McCune Smith, MD, in 1837 became the first black American to receive a medical degree. A renowned gastroenterologist, Leonidas Harris Berry, MD. Berry was the first black doctor on staff at the Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, Illinois in 1946. Charles Richard Drew, MD, pioneered blood preservation techniques that led to thousands of life-saving blood donations. Lewis Wade Sullivan, MD, grew up in the rural South in the 1930s. There, he was inspired by his doctor, Joseph Griffin. He was the only black physician in a radius of 100 miles, Sullivan said. Mary Hughes Gaston, MD, 1939, an intern at Philadelphia General Hospital in 1964. In 1990, Gaston became the first black female physician to be appointed director of the Health Resources and Services Administration's Bureau of Primary Health Care. She was also the second black woman to serve as Assistant Surgeon General, as well as achieve the rank of Rear Admiral in the U.S. Public Health Service. Gaston has been honored with every award the Public Health Service bestows. No racism, black, victim, begging, crying, blaming. No. See, this inspires. These sisters and brothers, they went out and got it. Whatever it was. They're not selling you a sob story. I know this isn't interviews with these people. We're not reading interviews with these people. However, listening to the Obamas interviews that we heard previous, that I read previous, it's sad. It almost cripples you. It almost makes you think that regardless of what you do, you can get to the most prestigious position. It's a job nonetheless, but you can get to the most prestigious position in this country. And even these people who hold these positions will tell you that you got a problem from the starting gate. Let's shake it. Patricia Era Bath, MD, 1942. Interning in New York City in the 1960s, the first African American to complete an ophthalmology residency, noticed that rates of blindness and visual impairment were much higher at the Harlem Hospital's eye clinic, which served many black patients, than at the eye clinic at Columbia University. Bath, co-founding the American Institute for the Prevention of Blindness in 1976. The first director of the Office of Minority Health at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 1986, Herbert W. Nickens, M.D. Alexa Irene Kennedy, M.D., 1950 and 1981, she became the first black neurosurgeon in the United States, and just a few years later, she rose to the ranks of chief of neurosurgery at Children's Hospital of Michigan. Regina Marcia Benjamin, MD, MBA, may be best known for her tenure as the 18th U.S. Surgeon General, during which she served as first chair of the National Prevention Council. And by no means am I holding these people as gods. I am not. Whatever that is. But God does have a definition, and I am not holding them up as gods. Julia Haskins, special to AAMC News. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. See? Sisters and brothers, Americans. Sisters and brothers, they do shit, They don't just complain and beg. The College Today, the official news site of the College of Charleston. Five years after the first African-American students enrolled at the college in 1967, the school's doors had been opened to African-American faculty, according to the book, A History of the College of Charleston, 1936 to 2008, by former English professor Nan Morrison. Owelinder K. Grant joined the Department of Mathematics as the college's first full-time tenure-track black faculty member. 1 year later, Eugene Hunt became the second black faculty member and, according to Morrison's book, the first African American man to be awarded a full-time tenure track position when he accepted a post as an assistant professor with the college's Department of English. He also worked at the college as a visiting lecturer in public speaking in 1972. Andrew Lewis, an associate professor emeritus in the college's Department of Health and Human Performance, was among a group of the four more African American faculty hired in 1974. Listen to people like the Obamas and all the, people who telling you they experience this racism. White people don't see them. If you listen to them, you would think you couldn't achieve any of this stuff. Whether I think these things are achievements to be turned into goals of yours, whether or not to me these things mean anything, is not the point. The point is, if you should know that the way in which you achieve these things is to put yourself on a course to. It doesn't mean blame or be a victim. It means to figure out the best course of action in order to achieve what you would like to achieve, and do that. This is Face to Face Africa. Sarah Woodson, the first African American female college professor. Theodore Adu. In the mid-1800s, all through her life, she taught, gave lectures, and also worked as an author. Born on November 15th, 1825 in Chillicothe, Ohio. While in school, she taught at several schools founded by the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and after graduating, she would go on to teach at various schools in Ohio. Later in 1858, Woodson was employed at Wilberforce University as an English and Latin professor. This is from ConnecticutHistory.org. Edward Alexander Bouchet, the first African American to earn a PhD from an American university. Edward Alexander Bouchet, Yale College of 1874. 1874. By Andy Piazzik. Born on September 15th, 1852, Yale University, known at the time as Yale College. There were no policy statements excluding African Americans, and those in charge likely denied the existence of any unwritten policy to that effect. Again, this is Edward Alexander Bouchet, Yale College, class of 1874. Beginning in 1870, many sources, including Yale itself, referred to Bouchet as the school's first African-American student. Information unearthed in 2014, however, indicated otherwise. Research by several scholars and writers, including some at Yale, indicated that 3 men thought to be white and who preceded Bouchet at the school: Moses Simon, class of 1809, Randall Lee Gibson, class of 1853, and Richard Henry Green, class of 1857, at various times appear in public records as Negro, Black, and Mulatto. After graduating, he continued at Yale in the newly created PhD program in physics. When he finished his dissertation, Measuring Refractive Indices, in 1876, after just 2 years of graduate study, Bouchet was one of the first 6 people in the United States to receive a doctorate in physics and the first African American to earn such a degree in any field from an American university. This is the MIT Press Reader. 300 years of African American invention and innovation. No, I didn't say 400 years of slavery. And I didn't say 12 years a slave. I said 300 years of African American invention and innovation. By Portia James. It's a fitting person to do the article. Portia. Increasingly, we discover the African roots of many early craft activities. Teresa Singleton, who has studied archaeological sites in this, the hijack begins at the beginning. Teresa Singleton, who has studied archaeological sites in Berkeley County, South Carolina, points out that West African culture was thoroughly woven into the daily lives of South Carolinians in the colonial era. In South Carolina, slave houses were built with African building technology. Y'all gotta, if you're watching this, look up African building technology. And share the link. While in the Chesapeake region, excavated clay pipes reveal the decorative techniques of West African pottery. And when they say West African, where in West Africa? Which country in West Africa? It's a huge place. Technology not only illustrates how African craft skills were incorporated into American technology, but how Africans were themselves incorporated into early American society. The clay pipes and pottery of the Chesapeake, for example, tell us something about the changing status of 17th century blacks in America. Blacks in the 1600s. She didn't say about 17th century Africans in America. They correctly said 17th century blacks, properly Americans in America. It was not uncommon then for black slaves, black workers, black employees, and white workers, white employees, white laborers, indentured servants to work together alongside their masters, their supervisors, their managers, and for black and white artisans to exchange craft techniques and trade secrets with one another. Of course, that's what you do. That's what you doing tomorrow morning when you go to work. Trading craft techniques, exchanging craft techniques, talking to your coworkers. But by the beginning of the 18th century, as the previously varied forms of servitude congealed into black and white categories of slave or not slave, evidence of collaborative work disappears. At least 1/5 of the merchant seamen in Philadelphia in 1796 were free blacks. And by 1846, according to the National Anti-Slavery Standard, there were 6,000 African-American seamen in port cities around the country. Boston and New York became important centers of maritime employment for black men, as did the whaling ports of Nantucket and New Bedford, Massachusetts, where the population of African-Americans doubled in the 1830s. Most of those men labored as ordinary seamen, but a few rose to command. The whaling ship Loper, for example, was commanded by a black captain and black navigators and was manned by an almost entirely black crew. Out of their experience in these trades, they also became innovative. Of course, it was a black captain and black navigators and manned by an almost entirely black crew, properly American captain, American navigators, American crew, of course, because they probably had been doing those things for hundreds of years. Lewis Temple, 1800 to 1854, was another African American in the maritime trades who turned his skills to invention. Born in Richmond, Virginia, Temple migrated to New Bedford and by 1836 had set up shop at Coffin's Wharf as a blacksmith to the whaling trade. He moved again in 1845 to the Walnut Street Wharf, and it was in that shop that he developed the Temple toggle harpoon, a modification to the ordinary harpoon to prevent it from being pulled loose as the whale struggled. Stop struggling. There were many ideas for improved harpoons floating around the whaling ports, but what made Temple's different and successful was that he incorporated in it a wooden shear pin that broke as the whale thrashed, thus releasing the toggle at right angles to the shaft and so making it fast. Tailoring was a relatively easy craft for African Americans to enter, whether male or female. Thomas L. Jennings, 1791 to 1859, for example, learned tailoring and dry cleaning and carried on that business in New York City, where in 1821, at the age of 30, he received a patent for an improvement in dry cleaning processes, perhaps the first black person in this country to have received one. Henry Boyd, 1802 to 1886, a Cincinnati furniture maker, derived much of his success from his invention of the Boyd bedstead, a wooden bed frame designed so that its wooden rails could be screwed into the headboard and the footboard simultaneously, thus creating a stronger frame. By 1836, he owned his own bedstead factory, where he employed up to 50 workers and used steam-powered machinery. John Parker, 1827 to 1900, began working in the iron foundries of Mobile, Alabama, where he was apprenticed to an iron molder, but took on extra work to earn money. He moved to Ohio in 1850, established a foundry, and invented a tobacco screw press, among other devices. George Peake, 1722 to 1827, settled in northeastern Ohio in 1809 and invented a hand-operated mill for grinding wheat into flour. Henry Blair, a Montgomery County, Maryland black man, received a patent for a corn planter in 1834 and another for a cotton planter in 1836. I would like someone to, in the comments, leave a link to where Native Americans got patents for corn planters and things that involved corn, things that involved indigenous materials from this American soil, because it appears that they are absent. And it appears that the people who are doing things are the blacks, African Americans, properly Americans. Yeah, your family. Joseph Lee, who had highly successful catering and restaurant businesses, considered himself a bread specialist and invented bread making and bread crumbing machines. Alexander Ashbourne of Oakland, California, received several patents in the 1870s related to food preparation, including patents for products derived from coconuts. He later moved to Boston and then to Philadelphia, where he began manufacturing and selling such goods as tooth powder, ink, vinegar, and soap. Oh my God, people. The things that make this place run. I mean, do you know how to do any of these things? Why didn't you learn? Did your HBCU teach you? Why not? He later moved to Boston and then to Philadelphia, where he began manufacturing and selling tooth powder, ink, vinegar, and soap, all made from coconuts. Mm, mm, mm. Innovative, awe-inspiring. Henry A. Bowman of Worcester, Massachusetts, began a business that made awnings, tents, canvas covers, and flags. Awnings, tents, canvas covers, and flags. The latter by an improved method that he patented. R.N. Hyde left Culpeper, Virginia. That he patented. R.N. Hyde left Culpeper, Virginia for Des Moines, Iowa, where he established a custodial service in 1880. The experience led him to invent an electric carpet cleaning machine and to develop a number of cleaning compounds. It's in the 1870s, roughly. Jan Matzeliger, 1852 to 1889, is a good illustration of the case. He apprenticed as a machinist in Suriname, his native country, and then immigrated to New England. Unable to find work as a machinist, he took a series of odd jobs, including one sewing on shoe soles in a factory in Lynn, Massachusetts, then the Shoemaking Center of America. The Shoemaking Center of America, Lynn, Massachusetts. Working in that industry led him to a mechanical solution for a particular problem in making shoes. Machines that could sew and tack shoes already existed, but the painstaking job of pulling, smoothing, and shaping leather until it approached the form of a human foot still had to be done by hand. That technique called lasting. The most significant mechanical industry for the employment of African American males in the post-Civil War period was the railroad. During the 1880s, more than 70,000 miles of railroad track were laid, making rail transportation the country's largest industry. Black men worked not only in the more visible service positions, but also in the most dangerous and arduous jobs. This rapid expansion of the railroad system called into the existence many technological advances, and the Patent Office issued a wide array of patents to black inventors. Humphrey H. Reynolds, for example, patented a ventilator in 1883 for passenger cars that allowed in fresh air but kept out the dust and soot that usually enveloped a moving car. Smokestack lightning. Woo! Shout out Howlin' Wolf. African Americans continued to organize independent expositions and fairs. They also participated in the state and regional expositions where black crafts and manufacturers, as well as inventions by blacks, were prominently featured in the segregated colored or Negro departments. Thus, they gave us our own department. Thus, Inventions by blacks were displayed at the Cotton Centennial in New Orleans in 1884, the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and the Southern Exposition in Atlanta in 1895. Robert Pelham, 1859 and 1943, began his career as a newspaper publisher and editor in Detroit. His paper, The Plain Dealer, became one of the most successful black newspapers of the Midwest, and that led him into the Republican Party activities. Perhaps because, or that connection, he moved to Washington in 1900 and began a 37-year tenure as the U.S. Census Bureau. At the U.S. Census Bureau, Shelby Davidson, 1868 to 1931, came from Lexington, Kentucky in 1887 to work in the auditing department of the U.S. Post Office Department. And he was also drawn into the technology of office equipment. Granville Woods, 1856 to 1910, was born in Columbus, Ohio, where he apprenticed as a machinist and blacksmith. He then worked for a time as a railroad fireman and engineer, but became quite interested in the emerging field of electrical engineering, began reading deeply in the subject, and took evening courses in electrical and mechanical engineering. The need for a job led him back to steam engines, working on a British steamer for a couple of years, and again on American railroads, employment that also resulted in his first patent in 1884 for an improved steam boiler. But with the motto of Edison clearly in mind, he seemed determined to devote himself to electrical innovations and founded the Woods Electric Company in Cincinnati to research, manufacture, and market his inventions. The first of his electrical inventions for an improved telephone transmitter came shortly afterward and was patented in 1884. Lewis Latimer served the Union cause in the Civil War. Latimer made the patent drawings for many of Alexander Graham Bell's telephones and testified in court on Bell's behalf when his patents were challenged. Let's shake it. In 1884, Latimer began working with the engineering department of the Edison Electric Light Company in New York. 6 years later, he was transferred to Edison's legal department, where he served as chief draftsman for patents under legal dispute. This is from tech.co. 21 most successful black entrepreneurs throughout history. Ronald Barber. James Fortin, a Philadelphia sailmaker. Fortin invented a sail-making device that enabled him to create a highly profitable business. By the 1830s, he was worth an estimated $100,000 or approximately $2.5 million today. My goal is not to focus on the monetary gain. It is the ingenuity, the true hands-on creativity, and the inventions. Real men and real women. Samuel T. Wilcox. In the 1850s, Wilcox became a wholesale and retail grocer in Cincinnati, on top of establishing a pickling and preserving business. He was also one of the first to establish high-quality grocery stores, offering only the fanciest and best brands of hams, dried fruits, soaps, and other articles. This explains why a large number of my family members were labeled farmers as an occupation. I mean, look at what they did. Offering hams, dried fruits, soaps, and other articles. This is what you call education. When you educate / nurture / nourish your children at home, these are the things that they learn. They learn pickling and preserving. They learn how to dry fruit, how to make soap. I gotta figure out how to make some tissue. Let's shake it. Paul Cuffey, a successful 18th century sea captain and businessman. His all-black crew served the Atlantic coast and sailed to Europe and Mommy Africa. Stephen Smith grew up in Pennsylvania. From a young age, worked in the lumber yards, establishing his own lumber business in 1822, as well as dealing coal. By the 1850s, Smith was grossing $100,000 in annual sales. By 1857, Smith was worth $500,000, approximately $13.5 million today. William Alexander Leidesdorff Jr. Leidesdorff was one of America's earliest and most successful businessmen. He was a prominent figure in trade, establishing a successful shipyard, lumber yard, and chandlery shop, and real estate around the early to mid 1800s. Having built San Francisco's first hotel, he's noted as America's first millionaire of black descent. He's noted as America's first millionaire of black descent. What kind of descent is that? American descent. Leidesdorf could possibly be your relative. But you jumped over Leidesdorf Jr. and you went to Mommy Africa, West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, a theoretical place to you, something that doesn't exist to you. You have no ties. You have no idea where, who, how. You just swallow it. Speak with your elders. Find out who your family is, because Leidesdorf may very well be one of your family members, or any of these distinguished males and females that we've read about, these Americans. In 1856, his estate was worth more than $1.4 million, which would be equivalent to more than $20 million today. Robert Gordon, in 1847, he invested $15,000 in a Cincinnati coal yard and employed bookkeepers and laborers. Free Frank McWhorter, they called him Free Frank. Free Frank became a saltpeter manufacturer and businessman. He saw particularly high success during the War of 1812, when saltpeter was in high demand. Free Frank is also known to be the first African American to found a town in the United States. In 1836, he founded the town of New Philadelphia in Illinois. Free Frank. Or just Frank. Clara Brown managed to establish a successful laundry business on top of serving as a midwife, cook, and nursemaid. Wait a minute. Clara Brown managed to establish a successful laundry business on top of serving as a midwife, cook, and nursemaid. Invest in various real estate, eventually owning 16 lots in Denver, 7 houses in Central City. Damn. And some other property and mines around Colorado. Sheesh. Isaac Myers. Myers was an influential figure in creating one of the first trade unions made up of African Americans, properly American. Annie Malone, one of America's first and most prominent businesswomen. Malone founded and developed Poro College, a commercial and educational business focused on cosmetics for Black women, properly American women. Frederick Patterson and Charles Richard Patterson. Frederick Patterson was the first African American to manufacture cars. His father, Charles Richard Patterson, co-founded the carriage business, C.R. Patterson and Son Company, C.R. Patterson and Son Company, and eventually bought out his 20-year partner. After his father's death, Frederick Patterson developed the Patterson Greenfield car and was in direct competition with Henry Ford's Model T. Damn. See, I don't have children. But to you fathers out there, to you men out there, to you American men, are you starting a business that'll be named Your Name and Son? Is that the goal? Stop focusing so much on a high school diploma, a college degree, entry level job. The focus should be on your name and son. Charles Clinton Spaulding, Aaron McDuffie Moore, John Merrick. The three co-founded the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company in 1898. At the time, all three men were members of the Durham community. Spaulding, the general manager of a grocery company, Moore, a practicing physician, and Merrick, an entrepreneur with barbershops across Durham. At the time, Durham was referred to as Black Wall Street. We speak about this in one of my shows. I think it's the show is called We Been Talking Greasy, where I spoke about Pig Meat Markham. I think he's from Haiti in Durham, North Carolina. Yes, Durham was referred to as Black Wall Street. Y'all know Pig Meat Markham, rapper. Notably for the economic successes blacks were seeing through business. But unfortunately, the coming of the interstate. Anyway, let's move on. The company still stands today with assets estimated at $162 million. Maggie Lena Walker. Walker was the first black woman, properly American woman, in the United States to charter a bank. The charter a bank, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with spider eyelashes, but this woman ain't selling spider eyelashes. Walker was the first black woman in the United States to charter a bank. Madam C.J. Walker, who I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of. Born under the name Sarah Breedlove. Wow. Born under the name Sarah Breedlove. She developed a special line of beauty and hair products for black women under her company. Arthur G. Gaston was a serial entrepreneur who established a set of different businesses across Birmingham, Alabama, funeral home, as well as a burial insurance company, established the Citizens Savings and Loans Association, the A.G. Gaston Construction Company, and a financial institution, CFS Bank Shares. These people, these men and women, these American men and women, your ancestors, possibly, our ancestors, possibly, established things that you could put your hand on. Not some tech business, not some e-commerce business, not some theoretical numbers on a screen. Things that you could touch. Things that people needed. Things that people need. Ink? Come on. Homie was selling ink. John H. Johnson, businessman and publisher. Johnson was the founder of Johnson Publishing Company. Reginald F. Lewis, he founded the TLC Group LP, a venture capital firm, in 1983. He bought the home sewing pattern business, McCall Pattern Company. He bought Beatrice International Foods. So this is a Low Country Digital History Initiative, the Black Craft Tradition in Charleston, 19th century background, Bernard E. Powers Jr., PhD. Low Country Digital History Initiative. The Black Craft Tradition in Charleston. Charleston's large and diffuse black population has long been one of the city's most distinctive features. For most of the 18th and 19th century, Charleston's black inhabitants even outnumbered whites because the economy of the city and the surrounding low country region depended primarily on enslaved black labor. A small but influential number of this black urban population also worked in industrial enterprises and skilled crafts, such as carpentry and ironworks. According to the 1848 census, Charleston slaves were involved in 1848 census, Charleston slaves were involved in at least 45 different occupations. You go to 1848 census and you tell me if anything on that census says slave. It would be easier if they gave us some names. We'd really be able to go specifically do it. Were involved in at least 45 different occupations. Charleston slaves were involved in at least 45 different occupations. Slave, work, labor, many of which required considerable skill. In 1848, they still pushing the Kunta Kinte, shackles around the neck. A significant free black community also existed in antebellum Charleston. And by 1850, approximately 82% of free black males practiced skilled crafts. In the decades following the U.S. Civil War, 1861 and 1865, Charleston's black workers parlayed the skills they developed during slavery into entrepreneurial ventures. And this sidebar, or were those the very skills that got them hired to do the job they were doing, and they eventually started working for themselves? Perhaps a market emerged. By 1870, black male Charlestonians, or Americans, are documented as working in 158 different occupations. 26% practiced skilled trades, and their numbers made them the most highly skilled group in the city compared to the numbers of native whites and recent immigrants working in skilled trades. Native whites, native whites, native blank, question mark. As late as 1880, the distribution of Charleston skilled black workers was highly skewed toward only 10 major occupations, specifically the jobs of carpenter, brick mason, tailor, baker, cooper, blacksmith, shoemaker, painter, barber, and butcher, accounted for approximately 3/4 of all black skilled workers at the time. That's why today, in every hood around this country, in every state, in every city, in every hood. That's why specifically today, black people, we the carpenters, brick masons, tailors, bakers, coopers, blacksmiths, shoemakers, painters, barbers, and butchers. You know what I mean? So, that's not shocking, right? Right? Building trades in particular, such as carpentry and blacksmithing, were dominated by African Americans in the city throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Charleston witnessed a 20% decline in the number of coopers and shoemakers during the period between 1880 and 1900 due to the increasingly availability of factory-produced items. A history of African Americans in law enforcement. African American police officers were appointed to police departments in the late 1860s. 1867, Selma, Alabama. 1868, Jackson, Florida. 1870, Houston and Galveston, Texas. 1870, New Orleans, Louisiana had 177 African American officers, and 3 of 5 police board members were African Americans. 1870, Officer William Johnson of Jacksonville, Florida, became the first recognized African American police officer killed in the line of duty. 1875, Bass Reeves was appointed as the first African American deputy U.S. Marshal. 1916, George Ann Robinson became the first African American woman police officer. She served in the Los Angeles Police Department. 1928, Dr. Louis Tompkins Wright is the first known African American police surgeon. He later became president of the NAACP Board of Directors. 1941, William B. Lindsay became the first known African American state trooper hired by the Illinois State Police. 1966, Sheriff Lucius Emerson was one of the first elected African American sheriffs. He served as sheriff of Macon County, Alabama. 1972, National Black Police Association was chartered. 1976, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executive was founded. 1988, Willie L. Williams became one of the first African American police commissioners. He served in Philadelphia and subsequently became the first African American police commissioner of Los Angeles Police Department in 92. The illuminating history of Walter Burton, America's first black sheriff, America's first American sheriff, properly. Walter Moses Burton served 4 terms in the Texas State Senate. Here is the this is from Texas Historical Commission. This is somewhere in Texas. Walter Moses Burton, August 9th, 1840 through June 6th or June 4th, 1913. It says, born a slave in North Carolina. Pay attention. Born a slave in North Carolina, Walter Moses Burton was brought to Texas about 1860. He was brought to Texas about 1860. He was born a slave in North Carolina, and he was brought to Texas. He didn't go to Texas. About 1860, at the end of the Civil War, he purchased land from his former owner. At the end of the Civil War, he purchased land from his former owner, Thomas B. Burton. Now, his name is Walter Moses Burton. His former owner's name was Thomas B. Burton, from whom he had also learned to read and write. Walter Burton became a successful farmer and in 1869 was elected sheriff of Fort Bend County. He was elected to the Texas Senate in 1873 and served 4 terms representing Fort Bend, Wharton, Waller, and Austin counties. Retiring from the Senate in 1882, he returned to farming and remained active in local politics until his death. In my experience in looking at genealogical documents, such as census records and things of this nature, you come to learn that when it says that a person is owned by someone with the same surname, it usually means that for instance, in this case, Thomas B. Burton, it usually means that Thomas B. Burton was the head of the household, and Walter Moses Burton, being that he was also in the household and possibly his son, it means that he was considered to own him. Thomas B. Burton, if he was the head of the household, he would have been considered to own everyone in the household. Patriarchy at its finest. Let's shake it, and we will see. Burton was born into slavery in North Carolina. Now remember, he was born to Thomas B. Burton, okay? Thomas B. Burton was his master. Burton was born into slavery in North Carolina, though the exact year of his birth is disputed. His gravestone claims his birth year as 1840, while the Texas State Historical Association's biography of Burton states he was born in 1829. As a young man, Burton was taught to read and write by his enslaver, Thomas Burton, who owned plantations and had agricultural interest in Fort Bend County. This is Walter Moses Burton, the American. After Walter's emancipation, Thomas Burton sold him a sizable chunk of farmland for approximately $1,900, making Walter one of the wealthiest landowners in Fort Bend County in the onset of Texas' short-lived Reconstruction era. This is very interesting. Very interesting. Walter Moses Burton, his owner, after he was emancipated, after the word came through that slavery is over, Kunta Kinte is over, take the shackles off them people's neck and off they wrist and they ankles, it's over. And after that, Thomas Burton sold Walter Mosley Burton, who he gave him his last name. He gave him his surname. He owned him. He gave him his last name, his surname. Because when Thomas Burton passed away, he wanted to make sure that the person who he used to own got all of his possessions. After Walter's emancipation, Thomas Burton. So this is confusion, and this is disgusting, despicable stuff. After Walter's emancipation, Thomas Burton sold him a sizable chunk of farmland. And he sold him a sizable chunk of farmland. Everybody says that slavery don't pay. How could he afford to purchase, to buy some farmland from his master for $1,900 in the early 1800s, making Walter one of the wealthiest landowners in Fort Bend? So automatically he go from Kunta Kinte to one of the wealthiest landowners in South Bend. Let's shake it. Burton, Matthew Gaines, and George Ruby comprised a group of at least 52 black men who served as Texas legislators during the Reconstructive era following the Civil War. At the time, aspiring black politicians only ran on Republican ticket. In 1876, Burton, along with another influential black legislator of the period, William H. Holland, helped to pass a bill that facilitated the founding of Prairie View Normal School, which today is known as Prairie View A&M University. Normal school. Normal schools are very interesting to me. He had a reputation for being one of the more debonair figures in the state capitol at the time. We talking about Burton. He was the best dressed politician in office, and that was speaking across the board, white or black. Now we go to ancestry.com. Moses Burton, U.S. colored troops, military record, named Moses Burton. He's 20 years old. He enlisted as a private, discharged as a private. He was born about 1843. The plaque said 1840. The military date was 1863. He was 20 years old, and he was with the 83rd U.S. Colored Infantry. Okay. This is also from Ancestry.com. Walter Burton. Sometimes it's Walter Burton. Sometimes it's Walter Moses Burton. Sometimes it's Moses Burton. This is in England, select marriages. So, Walter Burton, age 23, birth date 1841. It says marriage date 1864. He got married in Norfolk, England, Catfield, Norfolk, England. His father was James Burton, and his spouse was Eliza Towman. That's what this record is. Let's keep going. This is the ancestry. There's just some records I pulled up. You can go back through them, maybe check them out. This is Ancestry.com. Walter M. Burton, Walter Moses Burton, 1870. Walter Moses Burton, he's 29 in 1870. Born about 1841. Birthplace, North Carolina. Home in 1870. He was in Fort Bend, Texas. You remember that's where the plaque was. I guess he got his esteem there. They have him listed as black. Again, he was born in North Carolina, Walter M. Burton. It says his spouse is Abba Barton. They say Barton instead of Burton. You find that these things happen quite a bit when you're dealing with census records. This is from Ancestry. This is the 1880 census, and this is Moses Burton. It says he's 40 years old. Born 1840 in North Carolina. Fort Bend, Texas is his home in 1880. They have him as black. He's the head of the household. He's married. His spouse is Martha Burton. Father's birthplace, North Carolina. Mother's birthplace, North Carolina. And it says his occupation, he's a farmer at this point. Because I guess he had retired, and remember, he went back to farming. And it says, interesting enough, we were told Thomas Burton was his master. And it says his father was born in North Carolina and his mother was born in North Carolina. Moving right along, we have Ancestry.com again. In 1910, Walter M. Burton. He is 69 in 1910. He was born about 1841 in North Carolina. His home in 1910 was Fort Bend, Texas. Race, it says black. Under it, it has parentheses, and it says white within those parentheses. Maybe black was what they called him because of his dark brown complexion, and maybe white was his social status. It says he's the head of the household. He's married, mother and father, born in North Carolina. His occupation is a farmer. He's an employer. He owns his property. He owns his farm. It says farmer, house, farm. He owns it. And his wife is Hattie Burton. This is City Mayors, African American Mayors by Tan Von by Tan Baum Hove, Senior Fellow, City Mayors, Research. It is thought that America's first elected black mayors were Pierre Caliste Landry from Donaldsonville in southern Louisiana and Stephen Swales from Kingstree, South Carolina. Both men were elected in 1868. In 1970, Newark, New Jersey, and Dayton, Ohio, both elected black American Democrats as mayors. Today, more than 1/3 of America's top 100 cities is governed by African Americans, with many mayors being women. This is from Politico. Black mayors are leading the nation's biggest cities. Remember, even as the president and first lady, you endure racism to where the white people just don't see you. You invisible. Even at the highest office. But that is current day. That is what your leaders say in 2024. Maybe it's time for a new leader. Maybe the leader is you. Maybe the leader is the brother, the American in this picture who holding them 2 shotguns. Do the right thing.